Hey, Mysterions.
Are we saying it together?
No.
Oh my gosh.
It's together, crime, cryptids, and controversy.
I tried.
Hey, Mysterions. I'm Shay.
And I'm Jen.
And this is Crimes, Cryptids, and Controversies. This is a weekly true crime and paranormal podcast where we work our butts off to surprise one another and our Mysterions each week with new knowledge. Sometimes we get super excited and post more than once a week, so don't forget to subscribe and keep up with our random episodes. With that being said, let's dive in. Born into a chaotic world, Aileen Carol Wournos never seemed to catch a break. One would think that the world outside her home would be a little less cruel after she spent years suffering so many sexual assaults at the hands of her own grandfather, neighborhood kids, and supposedly her brother. Unfortunately, the outside world had other plans for her. While this might seem like the setup for a case of a battered woman who endured years of trauma, it turns out that Aileen lived long enough to see herself morph into the villain, and 7 lives would be snuffed out by her hand. But first, news break. What a segue! Jen, what happened this week?
The trial has started for a woman accused of killing a pregnant 21-year-old and ripping her baby from her womb as she faked her own pregnancy. According to KTAL-TV, testimony in Taylor Parker's trial began Monday, September 12th, as prosecutors detailed Parker's alleged plot to find a newborn in time for her supposed fake expected due date. She also allegedly took elaborate steps to find pregnant women, such as allegedly waiting outside OBGYN clinics in the area and visiting consignment shops. She allegedly then honed in on the 21-year-old Regan Simmons Hancock. About 45 minutes before Hancock's mother found her dead, Parker was reportedly pulled over during a traffic stop and was holding a newborn infant in her lap. The child's umbilical cord was reportedly still attached and appeared to be coming out of the female's pants, as if she had given birth to the child. So, hold on a second.
She, tucked it?
She literally really made it look like she was giving active birth, right?
Oh, that's what it looks like.
Parker was allegedly performing CPR on the child when police stopped her, and they were both transported to a hospital in Oklahoma. Medical personnel reportedly determined Parker did not give birth to the child that was in the care of the hospital.
Yeah, no way.
She was arrested and booked into the Bowie County Jail on charges of capital murder by terroristic threat, murder, and kidnapping. According to KTAL, she pleaded not guilty but could face the death penalty if convicted. Parker's trial is reportedly expected to continue for about a month.
Wow, that's interesting.
Wait to see the end of this one. I'm kind of traumatized. I mean,
it gets worse. So buckle up. Today's story will.
I can't get the picture out of my head of what I just read.
Well, now into today's story.
All right, so today apparently we're talking about Aileen Carol Pittman. She was born in Rochester, Michigan on February 29th, 1956. Her mother is Diane Wournos, and her father is Leo Dale Pittman. So
do you recognize Wournos?
Yeah, that's what I was just thinking. It looks like I'm a little confused, but okay.
It's okay, we'll get there.
All right. Eileen's parents were both teenagers, with her mom being just 14 years old and her dad 18 years old when they got married on June 3rd, 1954. Eileen's older brother Keith was born on March 14th, 1955. The marriage quickly
devolved. It's like evolved, but backwards.
Is that a real word?
Yeah.
Okay.
You want me to look up the definition?
All right, I like it.
The
marriage quickly devolved, leaving Aileen being brought into the world while her parents were in the middle of a divorce, only about 2 years later. At the time of Eileen's birth, Diane was just 16 years old, and her father, Leo, who had been diagnosed with schizophrenia, was in prison for the rape of a 7-year-old little girl.
Yep.
When Aileen was about 4 years old, her mom decided that motherhood was not for her and abandoned her children with their alcoholic maternal grandparents, Lori and Britta Wournos. Keith and Aileen were both officially adopted on March 18th, 1960 in Troy, Michigan. So the alcoholic grandparents adopted the kids.
Yep, the poor, abused children. They went from one bad to another bad.
Wow. The grandfather called Aileen degrading names, and he drowned her kitten in front of her. What? Is that right?
So, it was alleged that he did that.
I was about to do a fact check.
TBD.
Both Wuornos and her brother believed that their grandparents were their biological parents, but at the age of 11, they learned that this was not the case, which further damaged the relationship between Wuornos and her adoptive parents. Aileen discovered young that she could use sex to get what she wanted, and by the age of 11, she started bartering sex for cigarettes, drugs, and food, and was allegedly sexually active with her brother. She was known to have a horrible temper, and when she was about 9 years old, it's alleged that she began stealing from her family and showing an interest in starting fires.
The age-old, yeah.
Allegedly, her brother and other neighborhood kids gave her the nickname Cigarette Pig and was fairly socially isolated from her peers. Wow, that's a rough one.
Dude, right? I'm like, wow.
Cigarette Pig.
That's extra special mean. Like,
Wow.
I was just called fat and pig.
I was called redhead, carrot top, freckle face.
Kids are mean.
You know, but not pig, but I guess I wasn't smoking cigarettes, so.
True, and I was just fat, so...
She did not socialize well with others her age and was prone to unpredictable outbursts of anger, resulting in alienation from her peer group. Aileen had a habit of running away from home, and when she was 13, she was hitchhiking home from a party and was picked up and raped by one of her grandfather's friends. Ugh, does it ever get better?
No,
Okay.
no, it's all downhill from here.
It is worth noting that I found the baby was the product of either the physically, verbally, and sexually abusive grandfather or the grandfather's friend, a neighbor boy, or an Elvis Presley lookalike.
Which is so weird.
There were a few different sources that had conflicting stories. By 1970, when Aileen was just 14 years old, she became pregnant with her rapist child. Aileen then met with a school guidance counselor who evaluated her, and she recommended that Aileen receive counseling, but the recommendation was never fulfilled. Instead, Aileen was sent off to a home for unwed mothers, and on March 23, 1971, she gave birth to her child, which was promptly placed for adoption, before Aileen could even hold her newborn son. Only a few months later, she dropped out of school. That is horrible.
Yep.
I
And it
mean,
just gets worse.
I understand she's a child, but that is just horrible.
And she wanted to. That's the saddest part, is she really, really wanted to hold her baby. It's interesting because later we find out that psychiatrists think that she'd always been a little unhinged, but I mean, she had that natural maternal instinct to want to have her baby and hold her baby. So I'm like, I don't know if it was nature or nurture, you know? It's that age-old argument.
Oh, I mean, if a biological parent has schizophrenia, the chances of a child having it, I mean, here comes nature, nurture, schizophrenia, alcoholics. Alcoholic is high. Sorry about the puppy.
There are puppies in the background. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I've heard that schizophrenia can develop later in life.
Absolutely. So most of the time, especially in males, it doesn't show up till the early 20s to mid-20s. Lots of times when young men are in college, that's when I've had sudden first-time onset of schizophrenias present in the emergency room because the parents think maybe they've been doing drugs, maybe they're not sleeping, maybe they're too stressed out. I don't know what's going on, but something is not right. They're hallucinating. They're having stories that don't make sense.
Yeah.
They're not themselves.
Like
And that's
reality
the
is
presentation
just...
their parents will bring. Usually it's parents, friends, somebody close to them will bring them in and say something's not right. They always assume it's drugs. Lots of times it's sudden new onset of schizophrenia and people don't understand in general it doesn't usually present in childhood. If I had to guess, I would think that the sudden stress, not sleeping, possibly partying, alcohol and everything else helps the schizophrenia come on quicker.
Well, and it doesn't help too that this is such a traumatic thing where she had this baby, could not interact with it. And I mean, she had the baby out of trauma as well, you know? It wasn't a gentle thing that happened. It wasn't an oopsie baby. Like it was, but...
No, it's really sad.
Yeah.
It's worth noting that I found the baby was the product of either the physically, verbally, and sexually abusive grandfather or the grandfather's friend, a neighbor boy, or possibly an Elvis Presley lookalike. There were a few different sources that had conflicting stories.
To be fair, the Elvis one was like only one, but I just thought it was kind of an interesting throwaway thing.
Who's in charge of like taking this girl's baby away and getting rid of it?
The school they sent her off to, the school for unwed mothers. Yep. That's a whole other case that I want to look into at some point. These schools for unwed mothers, I've heard there's really jacked up stuff that happens there.
Okay, let me not get too far off topic then.
Nope. Let's get back.
So she didn't even get to hold this baby and they stole it from her and gave it to someone else.
Yep.
Her rage intensified. Well, of course it did.
Yep.
As she got older, she was known to have been frequently thrown out of parties for being vulgar, being belligerent, and initiating fights. The birth of Eileen's child coincided with the death of Eileen's grandmother, who passed away from liver failure due to years of alcohol abuse. And Eileen's grandfather decided that it was a good time to throw Aileen and her brother Keith out of the house. Because Aileen became so accustomed to selling her body for favors or physical items, she wound up supporting herself by age 15 through prostitution and living in the woods. She was once quoted as saying she hit the road sleeping in cars, begging, stealing, selling pills, and selling sex.
Like, just from 15.
But the thing is, that's normal for her. So
yeah.
That's not our normal, but that's her normal.
That's what's so sad is that's her world. Like you said, like, that is her normal. She was only 15, and she's immediately plunged into very, very, very adult scenarios that even most adults shouldn't have to go through, you know?
Well, and I think it was 11 that she started having sex, so...
Yep.
As a child, like, that's her world, you know, that's what she thinks is normal.
So, officially, her crime started after her first arrest on May 24th, 1974, when she was just 18, for, quote, driving under the influence, disorderly conduct, and firing a .22 caliber pistol from a moving vehicle, unquote. But she failed to appear for her court date, which added another charge to her record. So, her first one already adding up quickly.
At 18.
Yep. When Aileen was just about 20 years old, she hitchhiked her way to Florida and met a 69-year-old yacht club president named Louis Gratz Fell, and they quickly got married and announced their nuptials in local newspaper society pages.
I can't.
He was like kind of one of those higher members of society, so that's just one of the things you do. Because Aileen had a propensity to rage out at any given moment, she developed a reputation for getting into confrontations at her local bar and even went to jail for assault, obviously. Mm-hmm. Within a few weeks of marriage, she hit her husband with his own cane, and he filed a restraining order against her.
Oh boy, 69 too.
Poor boy, probably had like hemorrhaging in his brain. So, there was a really unfortunate 7-day stretch of time between July 14th and July 21st, where Aileen was going through it in a real big way in 1976. She ended up returning home to Michigan, and on July 14th, 1976, she was arrested in Bernie's Club for assault and disturbing the peace after throwing a cue ball at the bartender's head.
Ooh.
Yep.
That could have killed him.
Yeah. Well, so could the cane to the head. I don't think she cares.
Ooh.
On July 17th, her brother lost his battle with esophageal cancer, with the only silver lining being that Aileen was able to inherit $10,000 from his life insurance.
Really?
Mm-hmm. After only 9 weeks, Aileen and her husband annulled their marriage on July 21st.
Wow.
Yeah.
Shotgun wedding.
Dude, and that was just 7 days of shit. I would feel bad for her if I didn't know it was coming. The next month, in August of 1976, Aileen sustained a $105 fine for drunk driving, but she was able to spend her inheritance from Kevin in order to pay the fine. Within 2 months, she had spent all $10,000 on, quote, luxurious items that included a new car that she almost immediately totaled.
Oh my goodness.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, $10,000 in the mid-70s.
Ooh, what is the inflation conversion? Hold, please. All right, are you ready for the amount?
I'm ready.
$52,051.14.
I was close 5 times.
Yeah, that's crazy. That's a lot of money for, what, an 18-year-old?
Well, yeah, and cars didn't cost what they cost now.
No,
so
God, no.
What was she spending all this money on? I mean, a car was what, $3,000 or $4,000 back then?
2 years later, in 1978, she was just 22 years old, and Aileen attempted to commit suicide by shooting herself in the stomach, which at this point would have been the 6th time since she turned 14 that she tried to end her own life.
Oh, man.
Mm-hmm. She continued to add to her criminal record, and on May 20th, 1981 was arrested in Edgewater, Florida, after she committed armed robbery at a convenience store. She only stole $35 and 2 packs of cigarettes, but she still managed to go to prison from May 4th, 1982 to June 30th, 1983. Like, really?
That's it?
Was it worth it?
But still, she committed armed robbery, and she got 1 year?
Yeah. Maybe
something's wrong right there. I mean, if you only get a year from armed robbery, then what's going to stop someone from doing it again?
Oh, you'll see. Literally 1 day after she had been out of prison for a full year, on May 1st, 1984, Aileen was arrested again for attempting to pass checks at a bank in Key West, Florida. And then on November 30th, 1985, she was named as a suspect in the theft of a revolver and ammunition in Pasco County.
Okay, just being that I was a Floridian.
I was wondering. I was like, ooh, when's it going to happen?
This girl is traveling the state because we
Oh,
all
is she?
know Key West is at the bottom of the state. Pasco County is above Hillsborough County in the Tampa area. So it's north of Tampa, which is central. Florida.
Oh my God.
So
in her broken ass car.
Right. And then she was in Edgewater, Florida. And I haven't looked that up, but if it's where I think it is, it's just a suburb off of Orlando. So she's not staying in just one area in Florida. She's booking around.
Just 2 months later, on January 4th, 1986, she was arrested in Miami on charges of car theft, resisting arrest, and obstruction of justice after providing an ID under her aunt's name. And upon further investigation, the officers also found a .38 caliber revolver and a box of ammo in the stolen car.
So then again, she went from Central Florida all the way back down to South Florida in Miami.
On June 2nd, 1986, Aileen was detained in Volusia. Is that it?
Volusia.
Oh, Volusia County,
You were
Florida,
close.
for questioning after a quote-unquote male companion accused her of pulling a gun on him in his car and demanding $200. She was found to be carrying spare ammo, and police found a .22 caliber pistol under the passenger seat that she was sitting in. So he was not wrong.
Boy, she was no joke. Right to the anger. All right, so let's talk about Tyria Moore.
Oh, I do want to interject real quick. I am fully aware that there's a ton of information on Tyria, but I feel like everyone's beat that dead horse into the ground. I put her in because she's a little bit pivotal. Well, she's actually very pivotal later in the case, but quick blurb just so everyone knows. I understand there's a ton of information. I just didn't want to go over it for the 1,000th time.
In 1986, when Aileen was 30 years old, she met 24-year-old Tyria Moore at a Daytona Beach lesbian bar called Zodiac. Tyria and Aileen ended up moving in together, and Aileen supported Tyria with her earnings from sex work. So she's back to the sex work. So she, in her mind, she's probably thinking that she's behaving.
She's the provider, yeah.
And she's behaving. Sex work is normal for her.
Yeah.
Both women were detained by Daytona Beach police on July 4th, 1987 regarding an incident in which they were both accused of assault and battery with a beer bottle. On March 12th, 1988, Aileen accused a Daytona Beach bus driver of assault and said that he pushed her off the bus after a confrontation between them and listed Tyria as a witness to the incident.
So she's like almost dragging her into it.
Wow.
Yeah.
So between 1989 and 1990, the bodies of 7 middle-aged men were found dumped in wooded areas off major highways in Florida. All right, so let's talk about Richard Charles Mallory. He was 51 years old in 1989. He owned Mallory Electronics in Clearwater. He was last seen on November 30th, 1989. He was a well-known lover of alcohol and would close up the shop and disappear for days on end, allegedly going on drinking binges. He was well known to the sex workers and strippers in the Tampa and Clearwater area and didn't really have close friends or relatives to notice if he ever went missing for too long. He would eventually return, hire temporary employees, and catch up on his workload. So when he closed down the shop for longer than usual, nobody in town thought that might be a red flag. It wasn't until a Volusia County deputy sheriff was just out on a routine patrol and found Mallory's 1977 light beige Cadillac Coupe de Ville in Ormond Beach that alarm bells started ringing. They found his wallet with his ID card, and 2 expired credit cards were found near the car. The car had blood stains on the front seat, and the driver's seat was pulled up really close to the steering wheel. That was unusual for Mallory, who is 6 feet tall, and this led investigators to believe that someone else must have been driving the car. It was also noted that there were 2 plastic glasses and a half-empty vodka bottle near the car, and this made it apparent that Mallory was likely not alone at the time that his car was abandoned. Now, just 5 miles from where his car was found, on December 13th, 1989, 2 men that were out searching for scrap metal found Mallory's body under a piece of cardboard, still wearing his jeans and a pullover, and his body was in an advanced state of decomposition, and 4 bullets were recovered from his torso during his autopsy. His jean pockets were turned inside out with his dentures on the ground beside him. Police quickly honed in on the only lead, a stripper named Chastity, who had told her boyfriend that she ran off with Mallory for a few days and killed him. Wow, Chastity just outed it right to the police, huh?
Oh, plot twist. Keep going.
It came out that she was just angry with her boyfriend when she told him that she was eventually let go, and Mallory's case went cold. Wait a minute.
She was just kidding.
Are you kidding me?
No.
What?
Yeah, she was just like, I went and did it because he was better to me or whatever. And then she was like, just kidding. It actually wasn't me. I just wanted to get a rise out of my boyfriend.
Oh my goodness.
Right? Like, don't fuck with an investigation, Chastity.
Okay, that's just crazy.
And also, don't say you killed someone. What the hell?
Why
That's
would
not
you go
just
say
like
you killed someone. Like, people
Right?
are in prison from being
Falsely.
talked into saying that they
Yeah.
killed someone they didn't kill, and you're just out there going, I did it. Chastity needed help. I hope she got her help.
I know. Thoughts and prayers, Chastity.
Right? Wuornos claimed that Mallory beat, raped, and sodomized her after he drove her to an abandoned area for sexual services. Mallory was Wuornos' first victim, and she claimed to have killed him in self-defense. Later, it became known that Mallory had previously been convicted for attempted rape in Maryland. At age 47, a soft-spoken construction worker in Winter Garden was last seen leaving work around 2:10 p.m. on May 19, 1990. Even though David and his ex-wife Dee were divorced, they were on good terms with one another and had spoken at lunchtime the day before, and David was supposed to stop by and see Dee after work. But his truck was found abandoned near County Road 318 on May 20th. So just a reminder, they found his truck here, and the driver's seat was pulled up very close to the steering wheel. David was 6 foot 4 inches tall, which would require the seat to be all the way back in the furthest.
Yeah, unless he's like knees to chesting it.
Right. Police recovered a blonde hair on the steering wheel and a ripped condom packet on the floor and noticed that the doors were unlocked. The license plate was missing and some personal items like tools, clothing, and about $600 in cash. The police also noticed that one-of-a-kind ceramic panther statue that he bought as a gift for his ex-wife Dee was missing.
So sad.
Yeah, what do you need with that? Why would you take that?
Well, we'll find out.
Okay, good.
Don't worry.
On June 1st, 1990, David's nearly naked body was found along U.S. Route 19 in Florida in Citrus County in a clearing. David's body was in an advanced state of decomposition, and he was only wearing a camo baseball cap. He was also found near a bunch of empty beer cans, and they recovered the used condom from the wrapper in his car near his body. David had been shot 6 times by a .22 pistol, and police identified the body by dental records.
Yeah, apparently he was so far decomposed that they could not identify him without the dental records.
That's just really sad.
Yeah,
really,
isn't it?
Really sad. And very reckless. Like, the things that they're leaving behind and the things that they're doing are not even protecting them. Like,
No, they're just like, let me just
do
kill this
whatever.
guy and bail out.
And roll
Yeah.
to the next one.
They just have zero empathy about it. All right, now we have Charles Edmund Karskinen. He was only 40 and a part-time rodeo worker and road digger and was reported missing May 31st, 1990. On June 6, 1990, his body was found in Pasco County. Holy crap, today, Junior. He had been shot 9 times with a .22 caliber weapon, again, and the body had been wrapped in a green electric blanket and covered in grass and foliage. His body also was badly decomposing when found. This time, his car was found after the body was recovered, and his 1976 Cadillac was found near I-75 and County Road 484 in Marion County. Again, the license plate was missing.
What's she doing with all these license plates?
I think she's just getting rid of them for the evidence.
But she's leaving.
Yeah,
Okay,
I
never
didn't
mind.
say she
Sorry,
was smart
Debbie,
about
no.
it. Fortunately, investigators were able to find the owner, Charles, through his VIN. According to his mom, he had left home with his .45 caliber pistol that had specifically a pearl handle, a Mexican blanket, a stun gun, a flip-top lighter, a watch, a tan suitcase, a black t-shirt, and gray snakeskin cowboy boots, and they were all missing from the car when it was recovered. Quote, his mother said he took the firing pin from the gun because he was afraid to use it, unquote.
Wow.
Witnesses reported Wuornos in possession of Karskidon's car, and Wuornos had also pawned a gun later identified to being Karskidon's. But that's what I was saying earlier, where you were like, what the fuck was she doing with that statue? Pawning them.
She's definitely not smart.
No. Just
If
wait
there's
till
any
you...
police report matching that, it's going to come up.
Oh, yeah. Her lack of intuition kind of fucks her later, thank God. Now we have Peter Abram Seams. He was only 65, and he was a retired merchant seaman and a part-time missionary. On June 1990, Seams left Jupiter, Florida for Arkansas on a trip for the Christ is the Answer crusade and was last seen June 7th. On July 4th, 1990, his car was found in Orange Springs, Florida. Tyria and Aileen were seen abandoning the car, and Wuornos' palm print was found on the interior door handle, and his body was never found.
Oh my goodness.
Now we have Troy Eugene Burress, who was age 50 and a part-time sausage salesman for the Gilchrist Sausage Company in Ocala, Florida. He was also the owner of Troy's Pools in Boca Raton and was last seen July 30th, 1990, after leaving the Gilchrist office in the afternoon in order to go on sales calls, and unfortunately he never came back to the office.
Wow.
His boss noticed and was worried and called the customers on his sales route, but no one had seen him that day, so he didn't even make it to an appointment. And at 2 a.m. on July 31st, 1990, his wife ended up calling the police to officially report him missing. Marion County detectives found the Gilchrist delivery truck at 4 a.m. on the shoulder of State Road 19, just 20 miles east of Ocala. When they found the car, the vehicle was locked and the keys were missing. So this is the first time that she left the car locked. So it kind of looks like she's starting to learn. I don't know.
She must have been watching the news.
We'll see that she was later.
Oh, ha. See, I didn't know about this ahead of time. She hit me with this case right now, right before we started recording. So I have not looked any of this up. I have heard her name before, but
it's like a basic overview. Yeah. 5 days later, on August 4th, 1990, his body was discovered by a poor family looking for a picnic spot just 8 miles away in a wooded area along State Road 19 in Marion County. He had been shot twice in the chest and back.
Wow.
A clipboard with a list of deliveries and receipts was found near his body, and his body was extremely decomposed because of the heat, and the only way that he could be identified was by his wedding ring from his wife.
All right, so now we have Charles Richard Humphreys, who also goes by Dick. Charles was a retired major from the U.S. Air Force. He was 56 years old. He was a former state child abuse investigator and former chief of police from Crystal River, Florida. He disappeared on September 11th, 1990. He had been married to his wife, Shirley, who was a cancer survivor for 35 years. Humphreys once served as police chief in Alabama. So, I mean, like, this guy has a big record of really a lot of service.
Yeah.
This is all public service pretty much. Abuse investigator, Air Force, former chief of police.
Yeah, it's very almost like an empathetic career path.
Yeah. A very hard one for a wife, too, especially having cancer.
Yeah. And 3 kids? Good Lord.
Yeah. Humphreys once served as police chief in Alabama, and he had just completed his last day of work at the Sumterville office of Florida's Department of Health and Rehab Services, where he worked as an investigator, specializing in protecting abused and injured children. Humphreys was about to transfer to the department's office in Ocala. So on September 12, 1990, Humphreys' body was found in Marion County. He was fully clothed, but his wallet and money were missing. Humphreys had been shot 7 times in the head and torso. One of the bullets passed through Humphreys' wrist. It was never found. Humphreys' car was found in Suwannee County on September 19th, 70 miles north, parked behind an abandoned Banner service station at the intersection of I-10 and State Route 90. Wow.
The way you said that was very southern. State Route 90.
So now we're going into I-10. So I-10 runs from the East Coast, where Jacksonville is about, northeast Florida, all the way west through Florida, and it keeps going, as you well know, all the way to about Arizona.
I was gonna say, isn't that that's the same 10?
Yes, that's
Girl,
the same
road trip.
I-10.
Let's go.
I've done it like 5 times in the past year.
Oh yeah. You're like, yeah, no thank you. I'm
so
sad.
Tired. I'm tired of I-10 right now. But yes, I-10 runs all the way from Jacksonville on the east coast of Florida, all the way out west through Louisiana, Texas, New Mexico, all the way to Arizona.
All I think of is Twilight, because Bella was from Arizona and her mom was going to Jacksonville so her stepdad could play minor league baseball.
Oh, man.
I wonder if they drove the I-10.
It's a long, long drive, but anyhow.
So sorry.
We're getting up to I-10, so.
Yes.
All right. The license plate, keys, and a bright yellow Highway Patrol Association bumper sticker were missing, along with all of his personal papers and favorite pipe. Beer cans were once again found in the car under the passenger seat, and a receipt for beer from EMRO store number 8237, a Speedway truck stop and convenience store located at State Route 44 and I-75 in Wildwood. The receipt was time-stamped at 4:19 p.m. on September 11th, 1990. That was the day Humphreys disappeared. When the clerk who was working that day was interviewed, she didn't recognize Humphreys, but said she recognized the woman in the composite sketch. The clerk said that she thought the 2 were sex workers.
2 women, sorry.
Okay.
Like Aileen and Tyria.
That makes sense.
Yeah. I was like, not Charles.
The clerk said that she thought that Aileen and Tyria were sex workers, who she is mandated to call the cops on if they hung around the truck stop. But since they left relatively quickly, the clerk didn't need to. Humphrey's personal effects were recovered 1 month later in a field off Boggy Marsh Road in southern Lake County near US 27. I mean, I don't understand why they have so much stuff already on her.
And they're just doing fuck all about it.
I mean, they have a palm print from how many guys ago?
Yeah.
She was arrested for a year, so they have her handprints.
Oh, don't worry, we get there too.
Oh. On July 4th, 1990, Tyria and Aileen were driving Peter Siem's car when they accidentally swerved off the road. They decided that rather than involve the police, they would abandon the car, of course. I would also love to take the time and mention that July seemed to be a very impactful month for Aileen throughout the years.
Okay, so I put that in because I was like, wow, she's really busy in July. That's crazy. Shall we refer to the top, where her first, stretch of 3 shitty things that happened, July 14th through the 21st.
Yeah.
And then let's see.
It's a very bad time for her.
Yep, and then she got arrested with Tyria, July 4th, 1987. It looks like summer in general seems to be a really bad time. Between May to July, she just has real bad luck. Well, I wouldn't call it luck considering she started it herself, but you know what I mean.
Unfortunately for them, this was all witnessed by a couple named Rhonda and Jim Bailey, who called the police and provided a description of the women. Rhonda and Jim were just hanging out on their porch enjoying a day when they witnessed Aileen's car careened off the road and said that the car's windshield was smashed and steam poured out of the radiator. Well, that's unfortunate.
Mm-hmm.
Rhonda and Jim said that a short, stocky, and vocal blonde was yelling and swearing at a tall brunette who was described as silent. Rhonda and Jim watched as the women removed the license plate and threw it into the woods. Aileen's arm was bleeding, and Rhonda ran over to try and offer assistance, but Aileen begged Rhonda not to call the police for help, saying her dad lived up the road and they just needed to get to his house. Both Tyria and Aileen got into the car and tried to drive away, but they weren't able to make it very far before the car broke down completely. The two started walking up the road when they were stopped by another person who noticed that Aileen's arm was bleeding, and she was clearly drunk when she asked him for a ride, and when he said no, Aileen became angry and abusive.
Yeah, she's not used to being told no.
He ended up calling the Orange Springs Fire Department to make a report about the injured woman, and when the emergency workers arrived, Aileen said,
"I don't know anything about any accident. I want people to stop telling lies and leave us alone."
It's interesting that she stayed, though. She's like, don't call the cops, but let me just hang out here.
Right? I would have dipped. I'd have been long gone.
It's kind of her MO, too, is just bail out, so I thought that was weird.
Obviously, the police ended up finding the abandoned car and ran the VIN and found that it belonged to Peter Sims. When the police looked into the car, they found multiple latent bloody fingerprints and bloodstains on the seat and door handles, as well as beer cans and a bottle of Windex.
That sounds irrelevant, but I promise it's relevant. The Windex.
Good old Windex. It cleans everything, right? What was that movie?
Oh, My Big Fat Greek Wedding.
Oh my goodness. That's what I thought of when I saw that.
Love that movie.
I gotta watch it again. In order to make money, Aileen and Tyria would pawn the victims' belongings that were stolen in pawn shops. Because Aileen was a known criminal in Florida, her fingerprints were all over the police database, and that led them to find her fingerprints on a receipt at a pawn shop where she had pawned some of her victims' belongings. The police also found that the bottle of Windex was purchased at Eckerd's Drug Store on Gordon Street in Atlanta and went to the store to interview the manager, who did remember the women. The manager remembered that they had bought a black box of condoms and cosmetics. When the investigators looked into Peter and his wife, they realized that they were missionaries who'd never drank or smoked and also never traveled to Atlanta, which meant that the beer cans probably did not belong to them, and instead belonged to the women who stole the car. John Wisniewski, hopefully I'm saying that right, had been working on the Sims case and sent descriptions of the two women to be distributed nationwide. At this point, Sims' body hadn't been found and his credit card and bank account remained untouched. Wysinski contacted the Florida Criminal Activity Bulletin and submitted descriptions of the two women, along with the composite sketches and a summary of the case. By January 9th, 1991, Aileen was arrested at the Last Resort Biker Bar in Volusia County, Florida, on an outstanding warrant. And the next day, police found Tyria in Scranton, Pennsylvania. Boy, that girl scrammed.
Dude, I was thinking that. I was like, homegirl ran.
And then Tyria agreed to garner a confession about Aileen in exchange for immunity from prosecution. So Tyria was brought back to a motel room in Florida and was made to call Aileen on multiple occasions under the guise of having Aileen help Tyria clear Tyria's name.
Yep.
So only 3 days later, on January 16th, 1991, Aileen confessed to the murders.
Those phone calls are hella sad, too. I listened to those, and, like, as shitty as she was, Aileen did seem to really love Tyria. And it was really sad because that was, like, the woman she trusted most in the world, and this happened.
And I bet she felt betrayed.
Oh, for sure. But even on her deathbed, like, right before she got executed, she still said that she loved Tyria. It didn't matter.
Wow.
Yeah.
Aileen claims that the men had tried to rape her and that every murder was in self-defense. You know, it just makes me wonder, and I'm not crediting this woman at all, but she probably had nature and nurture issues. And
oh, for sure.
Sex at 11, and, you know, that's the only way that she can make things work. And
that's all she knew.
Her mental stability was always in question, always, from the beginning, even at 18 when she was arrested.
Yeah.
I don't think she ever received any bit of help mentally at all.
Yeah.
And her claim to fame is always that these men are raping her. I have to wonder in her own mindset if that is her perception, even though it's not real.
I wonder if she was like, well, they were a little too aggressive during sex, so I was assaulted, you know?
On January 14th, 1992, Aileen officially went on trial for the murder of Richard Charles Mallory, and the prosecution was allowed to introduce evidence related to her other crimes that normally are not admissible in criminal trials. However, under Florida's Williams rule, the prosecution was allowed to submit these convictions into evidence. Just to quickly touch on the Williams rule, the Williams rule is based on the holding in the Florida state case of Williams versus State, in which relevant evidence of collateral crimes is admissible at jury trial when it does not go to prove the bad character or criminal propensity of the defendant, but is used to show motive. So that's interesting.
Yeah, right?
There were multiple attempts from Aileen's defense during the trial to introduce evidence that Mallory was previously convicted for attempted rape in Maryland and served 8 years at a maximum security correctional facility that provided remediation to sexual offenders from 1958 to 1962 as a result of a criminal charge of assault with intent to rape. So they're obviously trying to bash all the victims.
Yeah.
It's just really sad that these families have to go through this.
Mm-hmm.
It was observed during his treatment that Mallory had possessed strong sociopathic trends. On January 27, 1992, Wournos was convicted of Mallory's murder with help from Moore's testimony, and only 4 days later, she was sentenced to death despite her psychiatrist for the defense testifying that Aileen was mentally unstable and diagnosed her with borderline personality disorder and antisocial personality disorder. On March 31, 1992, Aileen said in part, "I wanted to confess to you that Richard Mallory did violently rape me as I've told you, but these others did not. They only began to start to."
That kind of lends credence to what you were saying.
You know,
interesting.
And here we go with the borderline personality disorder and the antisocial disorders. So in her mind, that is her truth. When you have borderline personality disorder, their truths are their truths. You can't change that.
Again, that's not a defense for her. We don't condone what she did, but it's just interesting to gain perspective.
It would be interesting if a psychiatrist actually asked her what the definition of rape is.
Oh, shoot.
I would be very interested to know what that is, because my guess is she's going to say when a man has sex with a woman.
That's really interesting.
As she pleaded no contest to the murders of Charles Richard Humphreys, Troy Eugene Burris, and David Andrew Spears, and said that she was making that statement in order to get right with God. On May 15, 1992, Wournos was given 3 more death sentences. In June 1992, Wournos pleaded guilty to the murder of Charles Edmund Carskadden. In November 1992, Aileen received her 5th death sentence. In February 1993, Wournos pleaded guilty to the murder of Walter Geno Antonio and was sentenced to death again. No charges were brought against her for the murder of Peter Abraham Seams, as his body was never found. In all, Wournos received 6 death sentences.
God. Aileen's story was all over the place because initially she said that the 7 men had raped her as she was working as a sex worker, but then later recanted that claim. And then she went on to say that she was more interested in robbery and killed the men to avoid leaving witnesses behind. Aileen had consented to an interview with a filmmaker named Nick Broomfield, and when Aileen thought the cameras were off, she did confess. She did confess that it was actually self-defense, and that she could not stand being on death row for the past 10 years and wanted to die. In a 2001 petition to the Florida Supreme Court, she stated her intention to dismiss her legal counsel and terminate all pending appeals. She wrote, quote, "I killed those men, robbed them as cold as ice, and I'd do it again too. There's no chance in keeping me alive or anything because I'd kill again. I have hate crawling through my system. I am so sick of hearing this she's crazy stuff. I've been evaluated so many times. I'm competent, sane, and I'm trying to tell the truth. I'm the one who seriously hates human life and would kill again, unquote.
Well, there you go.
Yeah. Despite all of the evidence pointing toward a lack of mental competence and her attorneys arguing that she was not mentally competent enough to make that request, Aileen said that she knew what she was doing, and the court-appointed panel of psychiatrists apparently agreed, which I think is bullshit, and we're gonna go over that in the next few bullet points. By 2002, Eileen's paranoia ramped up, and she began accusing the prison matrons of, quote, tainting her food with dirt, saliva, and urine, unquote, and said that she overheard conversations among the prison personnel, quote, trying to get me pushed over the brink by them so I'd wind up committing suicide before the execution, unquote, and, quote, wishing to rape me before execution, unquote. She listed multiple instances in which she felt that her treatment was horribly inhumane while waiting on death row. Things only increased in intensity in the weeks leading up to her execution, and she talked about, quote, being taken away to meet God and Jesus and the angels and whatever is beyond the beyond, unquote. She said that every time she would complain in prison, her food poisonings and other abuses would worsen, with the goal of making her appear insane, or worse, to actually drive her insane. In her final interview with Broomfield, she said that her mind was tortured and that her head was crushed by sonic pressure, and said to Nick, quote, you sabotaged my ass, society, and the cops, and the system. A raped woman got executed and was used for books and movies and shit, unquote. And her final on-camera words were, quote, thanks a lot, society, for railroading my ass, unquote.
And this goes totally with borderline personality disorder and antisocial disorder. She's boxed in. Now, remember what she was doing. She was all over the place, impulsive, with no thoughts of what she was doing. She did what she wanted to do.
There was like no consequence.
No.
She was just like boop, boop, boop.
So yeah, she is in her own mind sabotaged and boxed up, and her mind is crazy because she can't run.
And she like doesn't understand. She's like, what the fuck? No. I was the victim.
She can't understand what we understand. She never would have been able to.
See, and that's what's so sad. That's why I'm like, everyone failed here. Like the whole thing is so jacked because she was clearly suffering from a young age.
I don't understand at 18 how you commit armed robbery and you only get a year in jail.
Yep.
It could have been a possible way for the judge to order a couple years of probation with counseling.
That would have been best, but I guess it was the 70s and no one gave a shit. I don't know, man. It was interesting too because when her best friend growing up saw that quote to Nick, she was basically like, look, it wasn't against you. It was a general statement. She was just angry, like, please don't take it personally, because her best friend actually wrote her for years and let Aileen basically write her own life story, which you can find online in actual book form, I think. But it's really interesting to see Eileen's perspective, but I feel like she's an untrustworthy narrator almost.
Absolutely. We're getting facts of her perception in her world.
Yeah. So it's really interesting to like read her side, but then from a more rational, sane side being like, okay, that's interesting that you think that, but if you didn't have these things going on, you probably would see it from everyone else's perspective.
Yeah.
It's crazy. Aileen was executed by lethal injection on October 9th, 2002, and died at 9:47 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. At Eileen's request, Natalie Merchant's song Carnival, that Aileen spent many hours listening to on death row, played at her funeral. When Merchant found out about this, she gave permission to use the song in the closing credits of Nick's documentary called Aileen, Life and Death of a Serial Killer. Like, she was like, yeah, you can play it. I'm glad that my music has touched people in so many different ways. Like,
that's a big thing for someone to say. Like, that's it's really nice to have somebody that open-minded to say, I made the music to help people, so it doesn't matter what kind of person you are. I'm glad it helped you in some way.
Yeah, like, I disagree with your actions, but yeah, it's really interesting. Her body was cremated, with her ashes being scattered beneath a tree in her home state of Michigan by that childhood friend that I talked about earlier, Dawn. She declined her last meal and instead opted to have a cup of coffee, and her last words were, quote, yes, I would just like to say I'm sailing with the rock, and I'll be back, like Independence Day, with Jesus. June 6th, like the movie, big mothership and all, I'll be back, unquote. She was the second woman in Florida and the 10th in the United States to be executed since the 1976 United States Supreme Court decision restoring capital punishment.
So Aileen had a psychopathy checklist and model. That's pretty much a psychiatric evaluation nowadays. It's kind of what they used to call it. They don't really call that anymore.
Yeah, it seems kind of derogatory.
Yeah, they just changed the wording on a lot of things.
Yeah.
So she had this checklist ran on her. She scored a 32 out of 40, and the cutoff score for determining that she is a psychopath, basically, is at 30. The checklist evaluates individuals on a 20-item list of antisocial and interpersonal behaviors, with each item being scored as 0, 1, or 2, and the maximum score of 40. Aileen also met the criteria for both borderline personality disorder and antisocial personality disorder. Some specialists believe that her crimes may have been related to her psychopathic personality and her psychotraumatic past. It is believed that her mental
Wherewithal.
Is that a real word?
Mhm.
All right.
I love words.
Apparently. I don't. It is believed that her mental wherewithal may have been destroyed as a child by her biological mother's abandonment and her grandmother's abusive tendencies, while she ignored the abuse Aileen endured from her grandfather. So Aileen never established the typical mother-daughter bond as a young developing girl. Aileen also never quite learned how to make friends because her explosive temper kept everybody at an arm's length, which made it difficult for her to learn how to love and be loved. And such severe trauma can also disrupt the structuralization of the mind at certain developmental points and result in primitive, disassociative, and splitting defenses to ward off the intensity of emotional and sexual stimulation that cannot be integrated as a child. So this is important for parents out there. We get busy in our lives and we all do the best that we can do, and it's very easy to judge people. It's a lot more to be a village and realize that everybody's kid is our kid. We're going to live in society with them. Yeah. And the number one thing that we can do for any child is give them some empathy. So before we worry about if we're punishing the child right or somebody's neighbor child right, if children learn empathy at a very young age and they learn caring, lots of this stuff never comes to fruition.
Right.
She obviously was never taught empathy. She was never shown love.
No.
And you can't reteach that. If you don't instill it in children when they're young, it's gone. Your chance is gone. She can learn how to mimic behaviors.
Yeah.
She can learn that you cried because of this. Now, if I'm in the situation, I'm going to do that.
I should cry. It's not true empathy, though.
Very manipulative, and she can turn her feelings on and off. But she is living in a constant state of confusion in her own mind. She doesn't understand why everybody thinks the things that they think about her, because in her world, everything is totally different than our world. Lots of times with these children, they just don't get the empathy because of alcoholic parents or just a bad situation. Yeah. If they got it from somebody else in the family or a church leader or someone, but she didn't. It's clear there was nobody. She might have got a little tiny bit from her brother, but that's not enough.
Yeah, you need that like almost constant as a child.
It's not an excuse, but it's something to think about when we have all these people doing the things that they're doing and ending up in prison. Is how
Maybe
are they
we need
raised?
To assess. Yeah.
Where's the thought of love and empathy? Were parents or family around? Did somebody pay attention to them? Did somebody hold them, love them, rock them? Tell them that they're special. Look them in the eyes.
And we're not saying that you have to do that now that they've gone out and slaughtered everyone.
You can't go backwards.
No, exactly.
So it's more like
start young, please.
Please start young. If you notice there's a child in your area and they're playing outside with your kids and maybe you see a red flag, give them a little empathy. Give them a chocolate chip cookie or something, or whatever it is in your heart. Stop them and tell them what a good job they did on their bike. Yeah. It takes a village. When one of our village is weak and not doing a good job with their children, the rest of the village needs to stand up and give that love and support to those kids. And remember, these kids are our kids. They're us.
They're our future, really.
Well, they're us, and they will live with us. And we need to make sure they all get some love and empathy. They don't all need money. They all need a little love and a little empathy at a very young age.
Yeah. Because like you said,
okay, I'm off my soapbox.
That. Good. That's okay. We love that. Snaps for the soapbox.
Soapbox. Thanks for hanging out with us.
So basically, for all of you who are here just to kind of chill with us, hang out with us, we're wrapping it up. So don't forget to follow our social media at CX3_podcast on Instagram. And feel free to subscribe to the podcast wherever you're currently listening. Leave a review on Podchaser, Apple Podcasts, or Spotify, because it really helps us figure out what worked for you and what you guys want to see changed. But for those of you who are here for the little bit of a puzzle we're starting to build, keep listening. We got you. We are giving the letter A. Write it down, remember it, love it, cherish it, and we'll see you next week.
We'll tell you what to do with it later.
Bye.
Bye.